He may not have a mic on his computer.
Oh, yeah.
Well, actually, if he's got a camera, he probably does.
For what? Mm. Mm. Are we going to let Dirk figure his thing out here?
Oh, we're past the hour.
Yeah, that's what he's doing now. There must be some setting on his computer that's muted, I don't know.
So quiet in here. Well, we already went past the record. No.
I don't know. Kramer could direct the city manager to come up with an agenda with nothing on it. Exactly. It's about how quick that meeting was.
Unfortunately, I don't think we can do that tonight.
Not tonight.
Oh, for a future.
So if we're going to keep working on this, I'm going to go to the bathroom real quick. Be right back.
Hey, good eve-
Hi,
can you guys hear me? Okay, there we go.
Now I'm missing another.
Yeah, now we have to wait a minute.
Well, Melissa's having some trouble streaming.
Oh,
Press up too.
okay.
You guys are gonna have to teach me how to do all this stuff, cause I wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Is Lakeco News on? Elizabeth, are you streaming this out on Lakeco News Live?
I'm not streaming.
Ready?
Okay, I'd like to bring this regular meeting of Clear Lake City Council and Redevelopment Successor Agency amended to add an emergency item to order at 6:05. Was on. Okay. My microphone on now? Can
Yep.
everyone hear me? All right. Did you hear me?
No.
All right, I'm going to do this again. At 6:05, I'm going to bring the regular meeting of Clear Lake City Council and Redevelopment Successor Agency amended to add an emergency item to order. Madam Clerk, could you call the roll?
Councilmember Purdock? Here. Councilmember Overton? Here. Councilmember Harris?
Here.
Vice Mayor Slutin?
Here.
And Mayor Kramer?
Here. Okay, may we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America. And to the republic.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing. This is obviously a very unusual event. We don't have a person coming in to do the invocation. I've asked Councilmember Purdock to do that for us. This is one meeting which we need all the strength and guidance that we can get from our Lord. So, Councilmember Purdock, please lead us.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we come to you and ask that your Spirit would be with us tonight as we conduct the business of this city. We ask that your Spirit would be with us to guide us and lead us through the duties that we have, not only here as city council members, but also out in our community, with our families and with our close associates. Father, we give you all the praise and glory as we know that you are not the maker of this situation, but we do know that you're the healer, and we ask that you would be with those here in this room and those in our community and county, in the state and in the world, that you would give them comfort, that you would make them feel aware of their situation and that they are part of the solution, and that we can come together as a community of good people who want to do the best for resolving this situation, that we will adhere to the leadership that is out there, that is in looking after us in our best interests and guiding us. We ask that you would be with them as they make these important decisions. We ask for this and give you all the glory through your Son, who is our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
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 Consent agenda. Does anyone want to pull or change or add? Vice Mayor Sloan, you can hear me ask that too?
Yeah, that's what, yes,
Seeing no one wanting to pull anything or change anything, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion to accept the agenda as submitted.
Second.
And I'm going to ask a roll call on this since we're not all in attendance here.
actually, Mayor,
Councilmember Purdock?
Aye.
Councilmember Overton?
Aye.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Slutin?
aye.
Mayor Kramer?
Aye. Okay, well, you don't have to worry about public hearings this time. And
Mayor
as I
Kramer?
understand, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just had a request. Before we move on, I wanted to just make sure and clarify related to public comment. So pursuant to executive orders of the governor, we don't have the public here tonight, as you're all aware. We do have to provide an opportunity for the public to comment. And so what we provided was sending the information out, of course, and then asking that members of the community that would like to provide comments, provide them via email to the city clerk prior to the start of the meeting tonight. And so I would just ask that the city clerk provide any information on comments received prior to the meeting.
I was just about to ask her that, but go ahead.
Honorable Mayor and council members, I have not received any requests for public comment via email before the meeting.
Okay. Having none, we'll move on to business. First item of business, item 3, ratification of the proclamation by the Director of Emergency Services declaring a local emergency and set next review of said proclamation for April 2nd, 2020, regular council meeting resolution number 2020-10. Are there any comments from the council?
Mr. Mayor, I do have a question, more to procedure. I'd like, Madam Clerk, is there a time lag between what we're saying and what's going out to the public? So should we allow some time lag for responses to come in should someone have a question on one of these items?
I would say there's probably a few seconds of lags. There's also a little bit of a lag between your comments here live and what City Attorney Jones and Vice Mayor Slutin see too. So we may want to have a bit of a pause
Thank you.
between comments.
Yes, I noticed that during the pledge. We'll give that time lag. At any rate, are there any questions from council? Vice Mayor Slotin, did you?
I have no comment on item number 3. It's
All right, since we don't have a public to go out to, I guess we can act upon it now.
Should we have a report?
Should we read it into the record?
I think we need to have a report.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, City Manager Flora, do you have a report on it?
Yeah, I'll make a few comments. I think the council is familiar with the actions that have been taken. So under my authority as the Director of Emergency Services, I declared a local emergency on last Friday the 13th. And I did just want to point out, though, that today I issued an amendment to that declaration, which you should have before you. And so this is just a small clarification that was recommended by our city attorney and police chief to make sure that we had the most tools available for enforcement of the health officer's order. And so with ratification of this, we will forward this along to the state and continue to enforce that order. And then, of course, you're familiar with the process of this needs to come back regularly each month for further council action. So I don't really have anything else to add unless you have questions about the declaration.
Thank you, Mr. Flora. Are there any questions of Mr. Flora? Anyone?
No, sir.
All right. Then seeing no questions from anyone, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to,
Wait,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Pardon me?
Go ahead. I was going to make the motion, but Phil started that thing.
Go ahead, Councilman Harris.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to adopt resolution number 2020-10, ratifying the proclamation by Director of Emergency Service declaring a local emergency and set next review for said proclamation for the April 2nd, 2020 regular council meeting.
Second.
There's been a motion made by Councilmember Harris and seconded by Councilmember Purdock. May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Overton?
aye.
Councilmember Purdock?
Aye.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Slutin?
Aye.
Mayor Kramer?
Aye. Measure passes. Moving on, business item number 4, award of construction contract for Pearl Emery Mullen Avenue Pavement Rehabilitation Project. I'm assuming that Mr. Swartz is going to give the report on this, since you just took up the seat.
Yes, Mayor.
Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. We been working hard on the Pearl, Emery, and Mullen project. Went through the design process last year. Strategically chose to bid it in or about February of this year to try to take advantage of favorable bidding times, which we've observed in the past. It looks like we were successful, as you can see from the results. We opened bids for that project on 12th of March, which was on Thursday. And we received, 7 bids. The low bid was $1,164,209.26, and the high bid was $1,768,180. Our engineer's estimate on the project, less than 10%, was in round terms about $1.9 million. So even the high bid was below our engineer's estimate of cost, which was, we feel was a very good thing.
We can use some good news.
Yeah, for sure. So with that, we're ready to move forward with that project, and we're looking for your authorization approval to have the city manager sign a contract with Lehman Construction as the low bidder, and also authorize the city manager to approve up to 10% for additional unforeseen contract amendments.
Okay. Are there any questions from council?
I have a couple.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor Slowden.
Okay, can we?
City Manager Flora and I have talked about that a bit, and there is a portion of that project that was slated for future construction at a later year. I want to say 2021 or 2022. I have the list here in front of me, which would further extend Mullen from Palmer to West 40th, which would be about 1,000 feet of extension. It would increase the project cost by about 33%. And I think that would be something that would be worthwhile considering. I don't recommend awarding that at this particular time. I'd like to get this under contract, and we'll have to do some design work, and I'd like to provide that design work to the contractor. I have briefly met with him. He's very open to that, but he'll need to see some form of plans and specifications, and so it'll take us a couple weeks to get that done. We have time to do it and get a formal cost from him so we don't miss something, or maybe it's less than that, I don't know. But that's the way I'd like to proceed with that.
I think that would be.
Go ahead, Mr. Schwartz.
Yeah, Manager Flora and I have also spoken about that, and we are working on that very thing right now on Lakeshore Drive from Olympic North, as well as San Joaquin, to have those other projects, as Vice Mayor Slutin has stated just now, to have those ready to go.
That's great to hear. Again, it's great to have good news. Council member?
Yeah, okay. When do we plan on starting these projects on this road here? When's the start date? Do we have one?
Yes.
Or approximate?
Yeah. We're looking at a pre-bid meeting with the contractor on April the 9th, and we start in the week following that, which would be 7 days after, so it'll be the 16th, 15th of April, right around there.
So will we be sending out notifications to people that live on that street so that they're aware that these are going to be happening? Or-
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And the obvious question, given the times, this is an essential service, I assume?
If you've driven down Emory, I
Oh,
believe
I know
you
that,
so.
but as far as the emergency declaration goes,
I don't know that that's my call. I'd probably have to defer that to,
well, I was kind of looking.
Manager
ways.
Flora.
Okay. Hopefully it is. Councilmember Harris, you have a question, comment?
Yeah, just a quick question about the overall scope of the work. That particular stretch of road, I know Emory, for example, is in really, really bad disarray. Is that a full dig out and repave, or are we doing some sort of a topping scenario there? And just curious, really, because of the dramatic difference in cost. When I see a engineer's estimate at 1.9 and we're awarding a bid at 1.16, that makes me wonder if there was anything that changed as far as the scope of the project or any of that sort. So just out of curiosity, based off the original engineer's specs, are we literally doing the things as designed, or did we change anything?
So to answer your first question, we're going to do a full dig out. The existing subgrade base material that exists in those streets is very stable. So we're going to dig out and we're going to put a full depth replacement of 3 inches of asphalt back across that entire street. So that's the answer to your first question. And on the second note, I lost train of thought there. What was your second question?
The second question was actually asking about whether or not there was a difference or change between the scope from the original engineer's estimate to the numbers we're looking at.
The biggest change is that the asphalt price was significantly cheaper on a per ton basis than any of the other ones, including my engineer's estimate. So 3 inches of asphalt is 3 inches of asphalt. So I don't feel, I understand where you're coming from, because that could be very suspicious, but he's got to put down 2,500 tons of asphalt.
That's literally the answer I was looking for. I just wanted to make sure that anybody watching understood that the scope of work that was anticipated is taking place as anticipated. The only real difference is we're getting a savings because of the cost of the materials, which is absolutely fantastic. So yeah, that was my main concern.
So the specs haven't changed?
Right, specs are the same. Because I know when we did over in Highlands Harbor area, we actually ended up changing the scope of it. So this, we're not changing the scope, we're sticking to the scope. We just are getting some savings on materials, which is just fantastic. So thank you so much.
Exactly right.
Are there any other questions? City Manager Flora?
I just wanted to point out that we did actually decide to add some significant drainage improvements in the area after the design team was out there looking at it. So that is part of the project. So it's great that the prices still came in very competitive. And then along that line, I wanted to point out that and make sure the council was aware in case you get any questions about this. So there's it's Pearl, right? That was in pretty good shapes. So there's a section of Pearl that's in relatively good shape. And so we looked at, do we just leave that, maybe do a surface treatment? But these folks, in their professional opinion, was that we needed to do drainage improvements in that area. And so we made the decision to design those into the project and to actually tear up and replace that portion of Pearl. So I just want the council to be aware, if you get some questions about why are you tearing out what seems to be a perfectly good road, you know, it's one of the better sections in that little area of town there, that's the reason. We felt like long-term it was really important to make sure that those drainage improvements were included.
And then I have one further question. I know that one of the aspects of us doing these projects is a moratorium on utilities. It's my understanding that the water main along that particular stretch of roadway may be undersized or maybe an aging water main. Is that going to be addressed prior?
You're correct in your assumptions, and no, it's not going to be addressed. We notified Highlands Water Company, but I believe that our notification probably came too late for them to fully react to it. which since now we have implemented the Joint Trench Utilities Commission, which we just had our first meeting here about 2 weeks ago, and so they are not going to be replacing that water line. We did make the offer, and they did consider it. I want to say it was probably, look back in August or September of last year.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're clear on the process then. If after we conduct the work that we're going to conduct, if they end up opening up our asphalt, will they be responsible for completely repaving the areas in which they've opened?
Yes, pursuant to the ordinance that was adopted, we would hold them to that.
From curb to curb?
Yep.
Okay.
And they're well aware of that.
I just want to make sure we're all clear on that, because when we get to that spot, it's going to get weird.
They should be well aware of it. It's a public noticed, and I would assume they are.
Okay, thank you so much.
One final point on that. They were the only utility that did not attend our joint utilities meeting, as I understand. So anything that the council or anyone else can do to encourage their active participation with the city would be helpful.
Understood.
I think maybe a certified letter to them informing them of what's going to happen if they tear up the road after we've repaved it might be in order. At any rate, Councilmember Burdock, you have a comment, question?
Well, I wanted to echo the sentiments of Vice Mayor Slotin. I agree that if we could expand the project, that saves in mobility costs and all that, that'd be wonderful to see. And if we could continue it up to West 40th, that'd be great for those neighborhoods. But also, I appreciate your foresight in asking for that letter to be sent. We want to make sure that Highlands Water is fully aware, because my concern is when that heavy machinery is moving around on that, are we going to have breaks in that water line if it's already compromised? It's been in for a long time. So,
I would say
good
that
points.
I believe their lack of communication and or participation has nothing to do with notification provided by the city, but we'll be happy to ramp up those efforts, because I can tell you from our perspective, it's very frustrating to see that lack of involvement from this particular water company.
Thank you.
If I make my small
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
One further thing, just out of curiosity. Do we have a mechanism in place that allows us, that in a certain situation like this, that we could take the initiative to cover the cost of installation of a water main in this scenario, and then pursue repayment from the utility? I just threw it out there. I just wanted to throw it out there. I just see this as being a glaring issue, and it very much concerns me. We're trying our best to get new asphalt on the roads. We have to have some participation here, and I understand the frustration that you're experiencing. I'm just wondering if there's a mechanism that we can look into at some point to try to curb some of this going back and redoing things.
Well, I think Vice Mayor Slotin may address this later, but I would say simply that I think there are some mechanisms available to the city to help remedy the problem, and would like to certainly talk to the council about this in the future.
Copy that. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Overton.
Well, I'd just say that, this is a shareholder company. And so, sometimes we need to reach out to people who are, with that company to go to their meetings and say they want these pipings replaced. I think sometimes you need to let the shareholders know they need to speak up too. So, because I used to be with this company, so, I think we tend to forget that as shareholders, they can go to these meetings and say, this is something we think needs to be happening.
No, the city hasn't adopted a dig once policy. The policy that has been adopted by the city of Lakeport, and I'm not sure if the county's adopted it, I believe is just related to broadband and not all utilities, but we could consider.
Sounds like a future agenda item.
Soon. Out of curiosity, how long is that water line? How many feet of the road does it run along?
100%.
Oh, my.
It would probably,
I definitely think we need to
Future agenda.
reach out to them.
It's my understanding that the water line is so small that it would be incapable of feeding fire hydrants. I believe, if memory serves, it's a 1-inch water line. Maybe, oh, it's 3 inch?
3 inches.
Excuse me, 3-inch water line. Some other areas are very, very small, but that particular area, I guess, is 3 inch. But again, wouldn't be enough to provide adequate supply.
Councilman Harris, maybe.
Well, I would just say that this is certainly something that staff has been putting some focus on, and we would like to talk to council about this because it is a problem that comes up way too frequently. The water infrastructure in the city, in my opinion, particularly with Highlands Water, and so we'll definitely be talking about that more. But we can't hold up all of our road construction projects based on their inability to upgrade their infrastructure.
Mr. Jones, do you have any comments on this situation from a legal standpoint? What can be done?
Well, I didn't hear.
Where the road will be torn up again. The point is, they need to understand that they're going to replace the entire roadway if they dig into it. Is there any way, from a legal standpoint, that they can be a demand letter or whatever, I don't know, something to encourage them to?
Well,
Go ahead.
yeah, I mean, certainly we can.
We'll put it on a near future agenda item then, or closed session item. Are there any other questions, comments?
I believe.
If you would wait until I ask for a motion and a second, I'd appreciate it, especially with it. Okay? So there's been a motion and a second offered. I think it was a tie between Councilmember Purdock. I'm going to let you do it this time because I think I didn't let you do it one other time. So, second's been made by Councilmember Purdock. Can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Overton?
Aye.
Councilmember Purdock?
Aye.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Slutin?
Aye.
Mayor Kramer?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0.
I love Measure V.
Thank God for it.
We all love Measure V. All right, moving on to item 5, discussion regarding a letter of intent to purchase the Austin Resort property between the city and successor agency to the Clear Lake Redevelopment Agency and Bailey Building and Loans LLC. This is another fun one that I've been looking forward to. City Manager Flora, can you tell us about this?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. So there's two properties immediately across the Lakeshore Drive from City Hall, one of which is owned by the City of Clear Lake and one of which is owned by the Clear Lake successor agency to the redevelopment agency. This is something that for a while has been envisioned as hopefully a hotel property. So we have had a number of discussions with a group that is interested in purchasing the property and a resort development there. So they would like to move forward in the process to do due diligence and negotiate a purchase agreement with the city. So you have a map there in your property. It's the two parcels totaling 7.68 acres. And what we've discussed and what they envision is developing a lakefront resort, including a hotel, a restaurant or restaurants, marina, probably amphitheater, and other related improvements. And so there's a relatively short time frame here laid out. They would anticipate, if the council approves this or authorizes me to sign this letter of interest, they would have 90 days to negotiate a purchase agreement, and then we would bring that forward. And then I just also wanted to point out that because of the sort of mixed ownership of this site, once the city council and the city council sitting as the successor agency to the redevelopment agency approve a purchase agreement, the purchase agreement on the one piece of property would have to be approved by the countywide oversight board of the redevelopment agency. So I don't know if you have any questions. There's a few things that shed some light on the details that have been discussed between the city and this particular developer. But the main thing is that they're interested in this letter of intent and moving forward as swiftly as possible, especially considering our current situation with the coronavirus. But they're still interested. I talked to them a couple times this week, and they're still interested in moving forward as quickly as possible to negotiate a purchase. So with that, I'd try to address any questions that the council may have.
One question, Mr. Purdock.
Not so much for myself, but for the public who may not be present tonight. I'm assuming we've done our due diligence and we've found that these people do have the means to complete this project if we accept their intent.
Well, it's always a little difficult to make sure that that's the case. I think the biggest reflection of whether that's the case or not would be, them sealing the deal on this and purchasing the property. But we had a meeting with them where both Mayor Kramer and Vice Mayor Slutin were present, so they may want to offer some comments on that. But yes, the research we've done indicates that these are a group of folks that have the resources necessary to do an extremely quality development here. One of the folks involved in this arrangement is a local business owner as well, so there's certainly some local knowledge there. But they brought in a professional marina developer from Florida to meet with us, of course at their expense. And so all indications are that they have the resources necessary to build something we're all proud of.
Thank you for that additional information. I appreciate it.
Vice Mayor Sloden, you look like you're thinking about saying something.
No, I think this is a wonderful
comments. I would echo those comments by, I'm sorry.
Guess I don't exist tonight. I've been getting the.
You're the only one that's using your pen, too.
Should have stayed home.
Go ahead, Councilmember Overton.
Okay, so I mean, I'm great that I want to develop the property. I have some issues. I don't want to be, I don't see where we're going to afford to do a roundabout. That's very expensive. Where are we going to come up with the money for that? And I thought when we had talked about this, that would be something that would be in the development agreement when we sold that property. So I'm kind of against us taking the responsibility for that. Also is if we sell this property to them and they don't develop it, then what happens? Well, I mean, that's kind of my concern. Then we have that property still sitting there, but then like right now, our public's using it, but if it belongs to somebody else, that's not going to happen. Are we going to end up with some fence around it where people can't get to it that looks awful? So is there going to be some kind of requirements for them to develop, or if they don't develop, what's going to happen if it sits there for a while? I want to make sure that we have some clarity on that because people are used to using it. So I don't want to see some orange fence around there for the next 20 years. So, I mean, I think there needs to be some criterias in there. If they don't develop it and they want to secure their property from the public, how's that going to happen? And the roundabout, I'm going to just tell you, I'm totally against the city paying for that roundabout.
Go ahead, City Manager Flora.
Okay, so to talk about the roundabout first, this was something that was actually in Public Works' work plan when the previous Public Works Director was here. And that was something that we pulled out, and we've been trying to focus on funding for curb gutter and sidewalks on Lakeshore Drive. And so, you know, there had been a little bit of work done on this. I believe that, so just to give you some perspective, this was just an idea that was brought to the table with these folks. They very much liked the idea that we had discussed it before and feel like it would make a perfect entrance into a resort-type development there. And so I would anticipate some type of partnership. That's why you see some language in there, including their participation in some of the frontage improvements. But we have had some discussions. I believe that a large part, if not all, of the cost of a roundabout here, it's something that's included in our Lake Walks analysis that was done by the Area Planning Council, and is very likely to be funded by dollars through the APC. And we may not have to use very many, if any, you know, Measure V or local road funds for that. So just wanted to provide that context. And then, you know, if the council has that direction, I mean, there are some mechanisms that can be put into a purchase agreement. I mean, obviously, our intent is that something happens there. It is a property that is, you know, kind of used a lot by the public, even though it's in a very rustic shape. But, you know, they are committed to maintaining public access to that property, whether it's in the interim period or with the final development. So,
Thank you. All right. Are you done? Go ahead.
So, yeah, because, I mean, so I think some wording needs to be in there that, you know, I don't want to use our Measure V for this roundabout. I mean, I'm totally against that. I don't know if anybody else is, but I'm totally against that. Because I'm really not, to be honest with you, I'm just not for the roundabout. But, you know, I know it's going to happen. But, you know, the reason why it was pulled, because I said if we develop that property, it should be on the developer. So whatever we can't come up with funding-wise, then the developer needs to pitch up the rest. I don't want to be using our Measure V for our roads to put a roundabout in. And I mean, it's not that I don't want this developed. I really do. I think it's a great thing. We've been all waiting for this for, you know, 50 years. So I'm really for it. But I don't want to be using our Measure V for that at all.
I don't think
Mayor
Measure
Kramer.
V can be used
You can't use Measure
for
V for
that
that.
anyway.
Measure V's for residential
I was
streets.
going to say, I kind of misspoke in saying local funds Measure V. I mean, our position has been that construction of new roads, like we didn't use it for the Dam Road extension and that type of thing, focused on road maintenance. I mean, it's been used for maybe some curb improvements and things associated with, but we wouldn't use Measure V dollars for this type of project.
So, well, I'd like some wording in the contract that has to do with, you know, when you say partnership, I mean, it's like, I don't know. I mean, partnership's really broad, how much money they're going to have to put up compared to us, because, roundabouts are very expensive compared to a stop sign, I mean, it just is, or a stoplight even. They're expensive, and I know that's the new age thing here. I just don't see where, how much property are they willing to give up to put a roundabout in, because we don't really have any space on our side. So have they looked at all of this stuff for the roundabout as far as the design-wise, or is it just kind of in the stable position? I just
No, I
really
mean,
don't want to be
the way
paying
this
around.
process works is we take this first step, get some sort of agreement, and then move into more details and negotiate a purchase agreement. So it's a little too early to work those type of deals out, but, there's a lot of properties in the city, this being one of them, that is ripe for development. It's been difficult over the years for the city to find folks who are willing to invest real dollars in quality projects. I believe that this is one of them, and I think we need to do what we can to make sure that this project's successful, because especially after the park's done and whatnot, I mean, talk about really transforming the waterfront here in the city.
What portion of the sale does the city actually get from the sale? I mean, we have our property, and then we have the Austin Resort property. So what part of the sale is ours?
Well,
The 3 acres.
yes, I understand.
Smaller
the
piece
distinction.
belongs to
I
the
know,
city.
I understand the distinction there. So, of course, the one piece, we would get all of that because it's city-owned, and then the other would be split up between the taxing entities. I don't 100% remember the percentage off the top of my head, but I think our share is maybe like in the somewhere between 10 and 14% range that the city would get out of that amount. So I haven't figured out exactly what that would be, but.
Just a second, Vice Mayor Slotin.
Because what I'm wondering is, would we get enough money out of that towards the roundabout, so that we're not actually, taking money away from something else that could be used?
Well, that could certainly be a decision of the council if we wanted to save that money for that project or something like that. I would expect it probably to be in the, what we have in here that they've, initially agreed to at this point is a little over 900,000. So, the city would probably be in the somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 range. Maybe a little bit more.
So with that, and maybe getting this other funding you had talked about, maybe that would cover the cost of that?
I don't know if any folks from Public Works remember. My recollection was that the initial kind of spitball estimate on the roundabout was around $1 million to 1.2, but I don't.
Yes, you're right on. That's exactly what it was. So, okay, well, that's just my opinion out there. I just wanted to throw it out there. I'm done.
Okay, Vice Mayor Harris, Slotin, Council Member Harris had his hand up here first, so I'll recognize Council Member Harris.
So I very much respect my fellow council members' sentiment on that, on the concerns for the expense. But I guess what I want to say is that we don't want to miss the forest for the trees, because given the situation that we're looking at here, we currently have in my opinion, it is utilized by our community, but it is a hazard. I would say it's more of a liability than anything right now. And we are looking at an opportunity potentially that could revitalize our downtown corridor, which could have a ongoing, continuous economic stimulus for our community. Not just that, but to kind of redevelop the face of our downtown corridor, which I think is enormous for us right now, and especially with the development that's taking place at the park. If we were to have this take place within a short run of the park being revitalized, it really does change the entire face of our downtown corridor. And even if we had an expense to incur to help assist this along, I think that ultimately if we're looking at it from the long-term perspective, what we're gaining from this is exponentially huge compared to our upfront costs of whatever we would have to participate in. And I understand we try to keep those upfront costs to a minimum, totally understandable. But as far as what we could potentially gain from this, I think is just wonderfully amazing. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on where we're headed with this thing and what it could potentially do for us. And again, I see that piece of property right now as more of a liability than anything. So anyway, so that's kind of my sentiment on that. Now, as far as this, what we're going to do about the verbiage, I couldn't agree more about whatever they come to us with the purchase agreement. There has to be a timeline associated. There won't be a buy a piece of property and sit on it for 10 years. And we hope, it's not the stock market. We're not waiting to see if the property value increases so we can offload it. There has to be a plan in place, and that plan has to be activated. That would be my feeling
Are
on
you
it.
suggesting timelines?
I'm suggesting, yeah, if part of the purchase agreement must be some kind of a timeline for construction to begin. There's got to be something in there to say we are going to move forward with some kind of a construction project here. What's going to be coming, what's expected, and not just a scenario where somebody's purchasing the property as a flip where they're going to sit on it for 10, 20 years and then try to offload it. Because I just feel like we experienced that a lot, and what we're trying to accomplish here is just what I'm saying. We want to revitalize our downtown corridor. We don't want a useless piece of property sitting. So that's my concern about it.
From my conversations in that meeting with them, I think they want it to happen as soon as possible as well. I think they talked about 3 years, Mr. Flora, if I remember correctly, or 3 to 5 years, but they would hope 3.
Yeah, I mean, it's somewhat undetermined. I mean, it's very preliminary, but
Right.
I definitely get the sense that they're interested in moving. I mean, you see the timelines even in the LOI, which were proposed by them, which are, I would consider
Aggressive.
relatively aggressive.
Yep.
And, one of the things that may impact the timeline more than their interest in moving forward is just potential Army Corps permits. Building a substantial marina could take some time. But along that lines as well, one thing I forgot to mention is this is an opportunity zone investor. And so this would be the first investor that has taken advantage of our opportunity zone designation here, which is good. It's someone that appears to be extremely familiar with this process, and I believe has done those projects before. And so, the plan that they have is not just for purchasing the property, but doing the set aside for the whole project in that opportunity zone fund.
Mr. Bailey actually became very animated when we started talking about the opportunity zone. I believe that's one of the big perks to
Okay.
him. Vice Mayor Slotin. Go ahead. Any other comments, questions from anyone? Okay, I would echo Vice Mayor Slotin's comments, his initial ones and then these latest ones. In our conversations with them, they talked about, I think, $20 to $30 million, but and the Opportunity Zone was a big part of their rationale for wanting to go forward. The marina expert they brought in was laying out a project just which had my eyes lit up, to be honest with you. I think that this site, whereas it might be a detriment now sitting there the way it is, I think it's the premier undeveloped site on all of Clear Lake. And it will most definitely transform the city of Clear Lake. That, with the Austin's Park being completed and this resort coming in, I see a very bright future for the city of Clear Lake, and I am very much for it. I agree that that the specifics of an offer, which will be becoming a purchase agreement, and the negotiations of that will encourage all of the, encompass all of the things that we've talked about. And again, I also believe that the price for the land that they're offering is really a secondary interest to me. I think the fact that we get a resort there with all of the employment opportunities that it'll bring, and the dollars to Clear Lake, and quite frankly, the prestige to Clear Lake, are far more important than that initial purchase price, as long as they build that out in a reasonable amount of time, and I believe that they will. But that's my comments on it. So at this point, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, could we just pause? This is a big item. We don't have the developer here in the room because of our current situation. Shut down. I'd just like to check with Madam Clerk to see if we have any comments or anybody wanting to weigh in on this item before we vote.
There were no comments that were written in, I don't believe.
Well, yeah, but this is public.
I have continued to check my email, and I have no further comments from the public, no comments, period.
All right, are you satisfied now? Okay.
Check item to item.
All right, so now we'll move forward. I will, again, I'll entertain a motion.
Move that we
Motion was made by Vice Mayor Slotin and seconded by Councilman Purdock. May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Overton?
Aye.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Purdock?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Slutin?
Aye.
Mayor Kramer?
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. All right, that brings us to our last business item. It was an emergency item added yesterday. Adoption of urgency ordinance relating to a temporary moratorium on residential tenant evictions during COVID-19 emergency. Mr. Flora.
I think City Attorney Jones is going to walk us through this item.
Yeah, I'm happy to do so.
Mr. Jones, are there questions for Mr. Jones? Or comments?
It's just,
Vice Mayor Slotin?
who would think
Councilmember Purdock.
Well, I just would like to suggest this, though. While we don't have the jurisdiction that the court does to deal with evictions and that type of resolution of this, I do believe our police department could be impacted with landlord-tenant disputes, and I think that as a council, if we're going to adopt this, we might want to have something prepared for our officers who might be called into these circumstances to give guidance to both parties as to what their remedies might be, come to the conclusion. So I appreciate Vice Mayor Slotin's comments, and as well as Mr. Jones, but I think that while we may not have jurisdiction to resolve these issues, I do know that that tip of the sword, our police department, is going to be called out for any disputes.
Chief White, do you have any comments, input?
We would obviously, if it gets passed, then we would let the officers know. I can tell you that right now, due to the public health officers' restrictions, we generally won't even be responding to those types of calls. They'll need to deal with that in the courts at such time that the courts are open. So we'll deal with it as it evolves. But we would certainly educate them on whatever it is that you decide to do.
That it's a civil matter and they would need to handle it that way.
Yes.
Right.
Councilmember Harris?
So, of course, given the situation, I'm personally very sympathetic to those that may be affected by COVID-19, whether it be due to loss of work income or from being ill from the virus in its by itself. Either one of those could find somebody in a financial situation which leads them in a position that makes it difficult to pay their rent. My concern about this is two concerns, really. That this not be abused, and that's where the verbiage comes in to make sure that it's clear as to what criteria is going to be allowable for somebody to postpone paying their rent. And then, the one thing that they need to very much understand is that they are postponing their rent. So if you had, a $1,500 a month rent and you go 6 months out, where now you owe $9,000, it's going to be a very difficult thing for somebody to recover from that. Even if they become employed again in a short run, it's going to be very, very difficult to recover. The other concern that I have is that some people in this community have developed rental properties as a position of income for their retirement years. And if you had multiple, just by chance, you had multiple of your rental homes that this criteria would fall upon you, then somebody, let's say in their senior years, that this is their retirement, may completely lose income, and that could be affecting our community in a different manner. It's a delicate balance. Obviously, we're concerned about everybody involved in this, but everybody has a stake in it. So I very much concern myself with people being affected and being evicted. I know we have something like a 50% rental scenario here in Clear Lake. But that does concern me, the impact of what happens at the end of that 6 months. And I guess that would be where the court system could be inundated with this. So just some things to think about here, just bringing it up.
Member Overton, did you have something?
Well, I was, just kind of trying to think of something that wordage-wise that we might be able to put in this that actually gives some documentation for proof, such as a letter from their job, proof of being unemployed because of their job not having the things. I mean, maybe I'm looking at this thinking that this might be just, saying proof, what proof is going to be required is going to be the key, I think. And I know we're saying, well, that's between the landlord and them, but we're putting in this ordinance. So I think, shouldn't there be some clarifications from us, or are we not, I feel like we should be responsible to say what kind of documentation needs to be provided, because this could be taken advantage of a lot of people, and then we're going to have people 6 months from now that can't pay the rent. Of course, the landlord, they've lived in the house. The landlord now is out 6 months' rent, still has to take them to court to evict them. So I'm kind of, worried about the landlords too. Like you said, a lot of people depend on these as their income. So is there some kind of clarification of documentation, say letter from their job saying they're not working at this time due to the coronavirus, or is there something else we can put in here?
I think to answer your one question, because I had some of the same concerns that Councilmember Harris had with regard to the landlord as well, and the fact that we do have a number of landlords that here in the city that have rental homes as their retirement income. But one clarification, that 6 month period, if I understand correctly, is for repayment. The actual time that eviction moratorium would be the time that, the way it's written here, would be during the emergency itself. There's some cities, I did a lot of research on this after Mr. Flora brought the question up to me the other day, and most cities, most of what I'm seeing here are 2 month periods with the potential to extend beyond that, as opposed to being open-ended. And I think I'd rather see it that way. We can always extend it, but I'd rather see it be set, whether the date is May 31st or April 30th, whatever you want it to be. But that 6 month period, just to clarify, unless I'm wrong, is the period in which that rent that's been deferred has to be repaid within. It's not that we're going to go out 6 months and not expect them to pay rent under any circumstances. Perhaps, Mr. Jones, you can verify whether I said that right or whether I was correct in the 6 month.
Yes, Mayor, you're correct. This particular draft, which is just that, a draft, says you have 180 days after the expiration of the emergency. So let's say the emergency lasts 3 months, you're talking about a 9 month reprieve. So if the council wants to make it 60 days and we reassess it at 60 days or 90 days, whatever you want to go with, I think that is understandable. And also Councilmember Overton's comment about defining documentation, or at least giving an example, I think is a good one. And so maybe under section E sub B, where it says provide verifiable documentation, maybe we say limited but not excluding a letter from your employer saying you've been reduced in time or laid off because of the virus, or a doctor's note saying you have been infected, something to that effect.
Yeah, I think the more specific, the better.
And I like the 60 days. I think we
So do
should
I.
come back every 60 days and reevaluate. I think in leaving it out, like I said, I just think that no offense, the people take advantage of this, and they'll figure out some way to get through this and live in a house for the next 3 or 4 months without paying rent, and then it's gonna go away, and then their landlord's gonna have to evict them, and the landlord's lost all this money, and you know, these people are just, there are gonna be people, unfortunately, there are people that are gonna take advantage of this, and I wanna make sure that we're protecting our people, not getting evicted because of their jobs, but also we need to try to protect the landlords. It's gotta be a balance here somewhere, so I'm thinking every 60 days that we evaluate it again instead of letting it go that far, because by then we might be able to hear from some of the landlords if he feels there are people taking advantage of it.
Mayor Kramer?
Yes, Mr.
Just
Flora.
maybe one clarification, if City Attorney Jones could make sure that my recollection is correct. But, so if we did the 60-day thing, I think all urgency ordinances have to be readopted within 45 days anyway, so the 60-day timeline may be good because you can kind of look at the situation that we're seeing after that time. But regardless of what you put in there, this is going to have to come back within 45 days if it is adopted tonight, and be readopted if it's to continue past that period. And then he may want to add on, I think there's a 1-year extension that you can do at that point for a normal urgency ordinance, and then it goes from there. But
That's correct. So actually, well, the first part was correct. The second part was a little bit not right. But you're right. We have to extend, the council has to extend in 45 days, but you can extend it up to a total of 2 years if needed.
So do you want to make it 45 days or 60 days on?
well, I would certainly recommend that in the initial draft, if you want to do that you leave the time frame at 60 days. I don't know if City Attorney Jones has a different opinion, and just anticipate that we will be bringing it back within 45 days so that you have a little bit of a gap there.
All right.
That sounds good.
All right, it works for me. Vice Mayor Slotin, you look like you're deep in thought there.
I'm hearing the conversation. I don't like the 180 days, whether it's 45 or 60. I'm fine with either one.
Okay. So any more comments? I will entertain a motion.
Well, but I
I'm
want to
sorry.
clarify something after Vice Mayor Slutin's last comment. He said he didn't like the 180 days and wanted to see something shorter, but as I understand what was being proposed would be that we would be removing reference to the expiration of the governor's executive order and saying that this urgency ordinance would be effective for 60 days, and then the 180-day period would start after that 60 days unless it was extended by additional action of the council. But
Right. So somebody doesn't pay for 60 days after the thing, the landlord can evict them. But as long as they have 180 days after that to pay up the rent. So you're talking 9 months by the time you're done, or they back up to their current again on their rent. Is that the way I understand it?
well,
Yes.
yeah, I think so. I mean, so it would be effective for 60 days, and then if anyone lost their job or qualified under this ordinance within that period, they would have up to 6 months to be current on their rent again.
So they would
Right.
have,
And you, in the mean, go ahead.
so
Go ahead.
So let's just kind of clarify. They would have that 180 days to pay up their rent. So, okay, so what, is there a plan to make them pay so much a month, or it's just up to the landlord and the renter to try to figure that out?
Yeah, there's just the encouragement that they pay what they can as they go along, and the deduction is supposed to be related to the loss related to their job or time spent taking care of someone who has COVID-19, et cetera. You know, I mean, that's something that's a little bit out of our control, but the
Okay.
intention is not that they would stop paying rent for this period of time.
Is there a mechanism where if things change in the renter situation, I guess, what's going to keep a renter from, if they wanted to misuse it, once they prove that they had good reason to defer part or all of their rent. How does the landlord after that be assured that those same conditions are continuing? Or is there some way that the landlord, can we put something in there where the landlord can ask for continued proof after 30 days or after 60 days or something, just to be sure that the conditions are in fact still warranted?
Yeah, so how it's written is you just provide that initial notice, and you would have, in this case, the 60 days of not paying the rent. We could do you notify the landlord at the beginning of each rental cycle, each month, that you have the issue. You got to do that in writing. And then you've got to provide the documentation that maybe that it extends. And then you have to pay whatever the amount that you have. It's only reduces how much you've been reduced. So if somehow your hours have only been reduced by 10%, then in theory you should only be paying 10% less rent.
Got it, but
I understand there's ability for misuse.
So my point, though, is that at the end of each month, each rental cycle, and let's assume for a moment it's monthly, that the landlord or the tenant has to reaffirm his situation in the same manner that he affirmed it to begin with.
I think we can add that, because as I'm reading section E, I don't think that is clear. I think it says you could do it at the beginning, and then you could take advantage of that. Well, that's a bad way to say, but you could get the benefit of that for the existing of however long we do this for 60 days. I think we could, when someone makes a motion, if there is a motion, I would say you can add that addition that every 30 days you've got to continue to provide proof of your problem, whatever the issue is.
Okay, so the two things we've talked about now to amend it would be to make it a 60-day urgency.
Up to 60.
Pardon me?
Up to 60 days.
Up to 60 days, as opposed to being for the length of the emergency, state emergency declaration. And the second thing, that the situation of the tenant be reaffirmed at the end of each rent cycle, monthly.
And then there was one other
And what was the third one?
item, which was to add in EB, where it talks about provide the landlord with verifiable documentation to describe what an example of that would be.
All right. So those are the three amendments that we'd be looking for if this comes to it, if we get a motion. Any other comments? Then I will entertain a motion.
Let's see.
Does anybody want to make a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance number 239-2020, an urgency ordinance of the City of Clear Lake relating to temporary moratorium on evicting tenants and declaring the ordinance to be an emergency measure to take effect immediately upon adoption, and with the changes that the amendments as of proof must be provided to the landlord monthly, and instead of 180 days, we're only allowing up to 60 days for this, and the proof that must be provided would be diagnosis of COVID-19 infection, proof of loss of work as related to COVID-19, or a medical some sort of medical proof that you have been required to assist in taking care of somebody that is diagnosed with COVID-19.
Second that. Very good.
Motion is made by Councilmember Harris and seconded by Councilmember Overton. Have a roll call, please.
Councilmember Overton?
Aye.
Councilmember Purdock?
Aye.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Slutin?
Aye.
Mayor Kramer?
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, that was a tough one. Move on to city manager reports, starting with the city manager.
Just a few updates. I'm sure that most of us have not been talking or hearing about much besides COVID-19 over the last few days, and so it's probably not wanting to hear a lot more about it. But as the city attorney mentioned, sounds like about 20 minutes ago, the governor just there hasn't been a released order as far as I can tell, but at a press conference indicated that he was going to initiate a statewide shelter-in-place order. They're anticipating that over 50% of the public is likely to be infected in California within 8 weeks. So just a reminder for everyone, City Hall is closed to the public. We've been doing what we can to respond to requests and process city business remotely through phone calls, emails, and working remotely. We have been this week processing some building permit applications still by trying to make sure we have adequate social distancing and so forth. Chief White has implemented an online reporting system for the police department, which is now available. I think it just happened today or last night on the city website. So that's a nice thing. And in fact, we're going to continue rolling that out to other city permits and other things as we move forward. But that's a big thing that's going to help them. I just wanted to take a quick moment to really ask the community to take the health officer's orders seriously. I would say in traveling some over here in the morning and traveling around town a bit today, the level of traffic both in the city and around the county, I believe, is quite alarming and is too close to a normal business day with the state of emergency that we're in. We do believe that it's obviously important to support our essential businesses being open and understand that this is an unprecedented burden on all of us. But the only way that this is really worth a sacrifice is if we follow the order, shelter in place, and hopefully eliminate or slow the spread of COVID-19. So we have been having twice daily briefings with the local agency partners. Sheriff Martin is kind of taking the lead on communicating daily with the public, but there's a lot of other things that we're communicating locally as well. Public Health is leading the response at the County Emergency Operations Center. I mentioned we're doing twice daily briefings. It is a pretty unique situation where an emergency operations center is in place, but it's difficult to coordinate a complicated response with a lot of partners when you have to stay 6 feet apart and try to operate through a lot of video conferencing and things like that. So that's certainly been a challenge. The county is looking at using the old juvenile hall site for a possible quarantine location if it's needed. And so they are starting to make improvements to that facility to make sure that it's available if necessary. I failed to mention earlier that according to an hour or so ago, there's still no confirmed cases of this in Lake County, but there have been quite a few tests done, and I'm sure that's increasing with each day. So unless Chief White wants to add any more, I would just say that the police department and code enforcement have visited most, if not all, of the businesses in the city today, trying to educate them on the order, making sure that they're clear on what the order requires, and if they were in violation of the order at that moment, giving them a short period of time to close down and come into compliance. It sounds like with very few exceptions, the businesses were very responsive to that communication. And, I would just add that I have complete confidence that, the folks delivering that message are very aware of the challenge and frustration that the business community sees in this. And, the concern that they have in being able to protect themselves, provide for their family and their employees, And I know that the folks delivering that message is always are professional and sensitive to that, but you know, it's really important to take some of these steps to eliminate the spread of this. So, and then one final thing, the city has deployed some lighted message signs that were, one of which was delivered today, and 2 more will be delivered tomorrow. So the idea of these is they're going to be placed in high visibility areas, primarily off of State Highway 53, informing the public that there is a shelter order in place at the order of the health officer, and that there is a $500 penalty that can be administered to folks if they're not in compliance with the order. So I think that's all I have, unless there's any questions from the council.
Are there any questions? Go ahead.
So one of my questions, because I'm dealing with it down at the community center, is what about the homeless? What's the situation, or how are we providing them a safe place? They're going to be out, so, I mean, they're homeless. So what are we doing with them? We can't very well fine them $500 for being around.
Well, the order as currently written essentially exempts the homeless population from the stay-in-place order entirely. You know, there's been a lot of, you may have seen some stuff in the news. The governor has issued some notifications that the state would be providing $150 million to help shelter the homeless and this type of thing. Unfortunately, for communities like ours, I think all of this funding currently is focused on the 13 largest cities in California. They've procured a number of FEMA trailers that are going to be used, but those are all going to Oakland, San Francisco, and I'm not sure if it's San Jose or whether it's Los Angeles. I can't recall, but there's currently no state funding being made available to support the homeless in communities like ours. So the Care and Shelter team at the county has been actively trying to identify some possible local locations that could take some of that population if they wanted to go, but that solution has not been identified yet.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Chief White, do you have any comments or report?
The city manager mentioned a few things, but I had something to read. So, Mayor, members of the council, members of the public, as we're all aware, we are in challenging and seemingly uncertain times. I speak to you tonight to reassure you that your police department is working around the clock to promote public safety and community health. We are closely coordinating our efforts with government agencies and stakeholders. As the city manager mentioned, we realize the enormity of the impact of the health officer's orders and now the governor's orders on our businesses and our residents. But rest assured, we're enforcing this order with courtesy, compassion, and professionalism. Our primary focus is on education, but we will take further action when necessary to fulfill the order's intent to protect the public. We have taken steps in line with the health experts' guidance, including limiting some of our in-person interactions with the public. We're also leveraging technology. As he mentioned, we rolled out the online crime reporting system, and we're rolling out the signage trailers to communicate the closure more widely to the community. Although our lobby is closed to the public, we are open for business, and we are committed to serving our community. You will continue to see your police officers and other staff on patrol fulfilling our primary responsibility to provide public safety. Our support staff, including 911 dispatchers, are also continuing in support of our frontline staff. We value our partnership with the community. We ask everyone to be patient, reasonable, and follow the directions of the health experts. This is an evolving situation. We are doing our best, and we are keenly aware that we will learn through this process. In closing, I ask everyone to remember that we have been through much as a community. We will make it through this together as one community. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief White.
One final thing that I failed to mention, the county's health officer has been in close coordination with the 3 different law enforcement agencies. There will be some revisions to the health officer's order. I don't know if what comes down from the state will change that, but there are plans probably tomorrow to make some amendments. And the idea in that is to get some feedback from law enforcement, who's really responsible for making sure that the public complies and make adjustments as necessary to protect the public health. So I just wanted the public and the council to know that it's still a little bit evolving to make sure that, because each community is addressing this a little bit differently. We're seeing, a lot of foot traffic that out there in the various cities, and it's not really fulfilling the intent of the order in some ways. And so I just wanted you to know that it continues to evolve a little bit.
Thank you, City Manager Flora. Councilmember Burdock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to echo the sentiments of the city manager and our chief of police. I've also had to report to work today as an essential function of my job, and I didn't see a whole lot of difference in the traffic and foot traffic. And I just, again, want to emphasize the seriousness of this, and that the whole purpose of this is to shelter in place, particularly of our most vulnerable populations. I saw several seniors who were obviously with health issues, one in our park, a couple walking to the store, and I know that these folks I know them personally, and I know that they have family, that they wouldn't have to go to the store. A healthier member of their family could provide them with whatever essentials that they needed so they could be at home and not expose themselves to this potentially deadly disease or virus. To that, I want to thank the businesses. I saw several businesses who were still open and trying to maintain the service to their public on a takeout. If we're looking at some of the restaurants, people could come in and get takeout food, so they didn't have that interaction. I'd like to thank and compliment them. I also wanted to mention, I spoke with our chamber president, and I'd like to thank the Lake County Chamber. They've reached out to our business owners and trying to offer some support and guidance as we move forward with this, and I think that the Clear Lake Chamber will be doing the same shortly. But if anybody has questions as a business, please feel free to contact the chamber. The office is open with our manager on site, but our lobby is closed to follow this ordinance. Next, I wanted to report our AVA report. Our abandoned vehicle abatement meeting was canceled by Supervisor Simon, the chair of the committee, but we only postponed it. And once this situation has come to a conclusion, we will be continuing that effort of keeping getting our abandoned vehicle funding going. I also attended a PEG meeting prior to the COVID-19 shutdown, and one of the things I'm really excited to report on is that the PEG board authorized I think a pretty exceptional expense to help support the stage across the street at Austin Park with some much needed wiring. I'm not a technical person, but something to do with a big snake that has a whole lot of wires that go into it. So when somebody shows up to perform a band or a comedian or whoever might be there, all they have to do is plug their equipment into the existing infrastructure that we will be supporting the finances for, and in partnership with the city of Clear Lake. So that was really exciting, and I'm excited to see when we do have our first concert in the park, how all that comes out. It's going to be wonderful, and obviously not to the scale of some of our local venues, like Canocti Harbor was in their outdoor venue, but at least we can probably be pretty comparable, and that's exciting for me. Anyway, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to thank you for the time, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilman Burdock. Councilmember Harris.
I don't have anything to report. I will have something to mention on potential future agenda items.
Councilmember Overton.
Okay, well, we had our first Traffic Safety Committee meeting. It was a short one, just to kind of get some directions and get our feet, kind of on the ground and going. So I'm happy to finally have that up and going again. Dale did a great job of getting us in there and out to get some direction, because we had these bids to get onto. So we'll be starting to have our meetings depending on the COVID virus and how long it lasts, when we'll actually probably have that. Second, I just really want to put out there that for our elderly people that are 60 and over, if you need assistance with food, to please call our senior center. We have our Meals on Wheels program going full force. There are, the only requirements for that right now because of this is that you're 60 or older. You can also, the center is open for food pickup for lunch between 11:30 and 12:30, where you can come by, pick up, and take home. Our dining hall is closed, though. We're not open to the public, but my office staff, we're still fully staffed, so our phone, you can call for assistance, and that number is 994-3051. So, I just want to make sure, our high population is elderly. A disabled person that an elderly person is taking care of also qualifies for Meals on Wheels. But right now, basically, if you're 60 or older, you can get Meals on Wheels delivered. So I just really wanted to kind of get that out there. Outside of that, that's pretty much, I've just been doing the same thing everybody else has. All our meetings have pretty much been canceled, and we've just been trying to keep our community healthy and safe, and please stay home if all possible. I agree, the traffic was way too much. I agree, I was kind of surprised. So please stay home and stay safe. I know we think this isn't a big deal. I didn't at the beginning either. I was saying we're getting too carried away, but if you really watch what's happening in other states, I think we're taking the right steps to keep our people safe. So please abide by the rules.
Thank you, Councilmember Overton. Vice Mayor Slotin.
I want to echo Councilman Spurdach's remarks about the police department and our businesses and citizens. The homeless is also a concern of mine. I'm not sure how we're going to deal with that. Hopefully the state will give us some direction and some assistance in that. I want to come back to a comment earlier in when we're dealing with the pavement project on Balmer and Emerson. I've been looking, I was able to obtain water system maps from both Canocti and Highlands, and the city supposedly has a system map for Golden State Water. And I also had a meeting with Chief Cepeda on that, and there are numerous places, if you look at all the system maps, where our water system is totally inadequate. It was built for the 1950s. There are certain requirements for fire flow, location of hydrants, and all those kind of things that are simply don't exist in the city. And if we want development, we need to upgrade our water system in order to do that. I will mention one small place that I looked at. The clinic area and the Hilltop building is only supported by a 4-inch water line. And I don't know how they ever be able to get the fire flow that they needed. This is just one place. So my intent is to collect these water systems, sit down with our public works director and our city engineer to go over it and really hammer on these water districts to upgrade their facilities. We can't attract development, or we can't protect for future fires with the system we have in place now. I hope to do that soon, but with these, with the coronavirus, which the reason I'm sitting at home because my wife has undergo an infusion tomorrow that will delete her immune system completely. So we have to be very careful. Any case, thank you for the opportunity to talk about stuff like this today, and hopefully we survive this coronavirus developments over the next couple of months, because I believe it will take months before we finally over this. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Slotin. Like everyone else, I've had pretty much our meetings have been canceled. APC, LTA was canceled. Spent a lot of time the last few days with City Manager Flora, probably driving him crazy, but I appreciate his patience with me as we've gone through this. I want to tell you I appreciate all of our staff and what they're doing in this unprecedented emergency. Our city staff comes in every day. They're doing their job. They're carrying on. I think that's heroic. Chief White, your police and code enforcement, all of your personnel are the ultimate professionals, in my opinion. I think we're so lucky to have you, and I appreciate all that you do. Vice Mayor Slotin, I think that's a great project for you. I think we all suspected that our water system with 3 different water districts or water companies that, it's uneven at best. I know I've talked with personnel at Golden State, of course, and I've gotten some sense for that. So I really appreciate that you're taking this project on, and hopefully you can affect some change in that regard going forward. So let's all be safe. Hopefully we'll get through this together. So that's all I have to say. Anyone else want to do over? I knew that was going to happen.
Future agenda.
I know that. Anybody else have reports? No? Okay, future agenda items. Councilmember Harris, you have one?
Yeah, I just want to bring something up that's of concern to me. As the COVID-19 spreads in the Bay Area and the Central Valley, I do believe that we may face a scenario, which we're already facing slightly, but it may uptick, and that we may have a huge influx of people trying to come to our area to remove themselves from the high infection rate areas. Well, I understand the concept, and unfortunately, we don't have the police, EMS, hospital, or infrastructure for storefronts, that sort of things to contend with a large increase in volume of people here. And it also goes against what we're trying to accomplish as far as shelter in place. Shelter in place is your home. Your home is wherever your primary residence is. I do think that we should consider every effort possible within the confines of the Constitution to keep people from creating a rapid influx to our community, because with them not only becomes a significant level of challenges, but it also reduces the overall supplies that are available to the residents, and it also brings with them potentially the infection that we're trying to prevent coming to our community. So a lot of these things are of serious concern to me. I don't know what the avenues we have available to us are, but I think we should heavily explore that. And we are elected to protect the citizens of our city, and I think that that's of serious concern to me right now. I don't know where this thing's going to go, but I think we should have a contingency plan in place to address this, and we possibly want to have an emergency meeting if we start seeing a significant influx. And that's it.
So you'd like to have that put on a future agenda item?
I would like that on a future agenda item, and I'd like it to be just some exploration done as far as what our avenues are as far as taking action on that. I mean, I can imagine a scenario where we have checkpoints and your ID is checked, and if you do not have a purpose for being coming into our community, you would be deferred out of our community. Obviously, that kind of goes into what we're trying to accomplish right now as far as people being out in public when they shouldn't be. I'm not sure what the confines are, but I think we should explore that and take every precaution necessary to protect our citizens.
Thank you, Councilmember Harris. Councilmember Purdock, you had a comment.
Oh, I just don't know if that might be something Mr. Jones could report back to us as far as legalities for limiting access to our city. I mean, if somebody had a vacation home here, I don't know that we could keep them from that. But I'm not the legal expert. I defer to Mr. Jones, maybe to report back to us at our next council meeting.
I will do it before then. We are, my firm is actively following this. Fortunately, we do have a number of jurisdictions, and we represent cities in Orange County. They've been on lockdown or shelter in place for a while now. Or LA County, that is. So I think we are constantly looking at that, and I'll let you know what avenues are legal or not, but I think it's something I'll be monitoring for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
I do have one more thing.
All right, go ahead.
So for future agenda items, we've talked about this, and I'm looking over at the chief. I know that he had done some research, but we never heard back on our renters ordinance, landlord ordinance for rental inspections. And I'd just like to fluff that a bit. Maybe we can get a date, we can actually bring that back for action or at least further discussion.
I've been asking for that for a while too,
I
Councilman
think
Burdock.
Chief White is going to respond to that.
So I've always told everybody that I would be honest and tell you the truth, right? Whether you like it or not. The truth is that right now with the situation that we're facing, we don't have any of the resources to look at that. It has not escaped us. We are aware of the council's intention, and I think once things get past the worst part, that we could certainly come back with it, but I don't want to give you the assurance that we're going to be dedicating staff resources to work on it right now.
Thank you, Chief White.
I would like to point out that we have done some work, well, I should say mostly Chief White has done some work on options for a third party to handle a bulk of the process. So, but what we had discussed, or what I had discussed with Vice Mayor Slotin was that we would try to bring it back by the midpoint of this year. And so, we still hope that we can do something like that, but you also heard Chief White about available resources, so. just wanted to provide
With
that
all due
context.
respect, I asked for this during the second year of my first term. So it's been several years we've been talking about doing this, so long before COVID-19 came into being. So it's been out there on the horizon for a while.
We actually have an ordinance in place, a staff.
Yeah, we have talked about it actually before the council. I don't remember if it was when you were back on the council.
It was.
Or not, but there's some work that needs to be done to make the ordinance most effective, and of course we have to figure out a way to be able to actually implement it. The priority at the time was implementing the vacant commercial property ordinance, which is now underway, and so
Thank you.
that's where we are.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flora. Vice Mayor Slotin, did you have anything else?
No, that's it. I wish everybody safe distance. I see that everybody's 6 feet apart over there.
Okay,
Vice Mayor Slotin and Attorney Jones, so we will adjourn to closed session, and so we're going to end the Zoom call, and then I will call you back directly on your phone.
Okay, great. Thank you.
okay, adjourn at 7:49 to close session.